If you open a live flight map, you'll see planes everywhere except for one blank empty box, a silent corridor where airliners are afraid to fly, where radars go blind, and where a missile could appear without warning. This airspace is above North Korea, the only place that aviation treats like a blackout zone. Every country controls the sky above its territory, and most nations share information about what happens within their airspace, which radars are active, which routes are open, which altitudes are safe, and when weapons will be tested. However, North Korea doesn't. It sits in one of the busiest aviation regions on Earth that intersect flight paths from all over the world that have to curve around it. If airlines took the shortest route, the Great Circle route, many of them would cross straight over the Korean peninsula. But they don't. They draw a curve around the entire country, leaving a dark and empty gap on global flight maps. However, North Korea's airspace is not legally closed. Almost nobody touches it because it behaves like a blind spot in the global aviation system, a place where planes can disappear off radar and where warnings don't exist. It's where the military treats the entire sky like a battlefield. And that makes sense once you understand how the rest of the world keeps its skies safe, a system that North Korea refuses to join. Commercial aviation is built on cooperation. Countries share radar data, announce military drills, coordinate routes, altitudes, and emergencies, and send warnings when missiles will be launched. When something goes wrong, air traffic control immediately steps in. The entire structure is designed to prevent a tragedy, keeping thousands of planes separated by meters and seconds, not kilometers and hours. However, North Korea operates outside of that system. Its air traffic control is isolated, limited, and partly tied to military command structures. The country rarely communicates with the international agencies that keep global aviation safe. Pilots entering the region cannot be certain that anyone will hear them on emergency frequencies or whether ground radar will track them properly. There are no reliable updates, no consistent warnings, and almost no coordination with neighboring countries. If a pilot were to lose altitude, suffer a depressurization, detect smoke, or even need a diversion, the ability to receive support inside of North Korean airspace is almost non-existent. And that lack of communication isn't only dangerous, history has shown that it can be deadly. In 1983, the world witnessed what could happen when a plane enters airspace controlled by a military that expects threats and not tourism. Korean Airlines Flight 007 drifted off course due to a navigational error and entered into Soviet airspace during the height of the Cold War. Confusion, miscommunication, and fear led Soviet fighters to shoot it down, and all 269 people on board would be killed. The lesson learned was simple. Where communication is weak, where militaries act without warning, where radar operators have only seconds to decide who's a friend or enemy, civilian planes are at risk. North Korea today fits the profile more closely than any other nation on Earth. Its defenses are primed for threats, its military makes decisions quickly, and its airspace is wrapped in secrecy rather than clarity. Airlines learn from history, avoiding places where mistakes can be fatal, especially when the skies above them are controlled by an unpredictable government. But if radar confusion was the danger in the past, the danger today is much faster and launched straight from the ground. The biggest reason that airlines avoid North Korea is the country's ballistic missile program. Most nations announce missile testing days in advance, but North Korea often launches without warning. These missiles can travel hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers, climbing through commercial flight altitudes before arcing over the sea. Some fall into the Sea of Japan, some pass above Japan entirely, and others re-enter the atmosphere along paths that airlines cannot predict. There have been moments when civilian pilots have looked out the window and seen a glowing missile trail lighting up the night sky. Silent reminders that the air above North Korea is not controlled by aviation authorities, but by its military. A missile doesn't need to hit a plane to cause a disaster. Debris, shock waves, and falling boosters can all be catastrophic. No airline wants to gamble on being in the wrong place during a surprise launch. But missiles aren't the only issue. Even if the skies were calm, airlines would still avoid North Korea for another reason, one hidden deep inside the country's infrastructure. Commercial flight safety depends on constant contact. Pilots talk to air traffic control when approaching new airspace, climbing, descending, or adjusting course. In North Korea, that communication is unreliable. Backup systems are unclear, and the country does not share its data with its neighbors. If a plane crosses into North Korean airspace, it's entering a zone where emergency calls might not be answered, altitude changes may not be seen, flight paths may not be tracked properly, and distress signals might not receive immediate response. The global aviation world never wants a situation where a passenger jet is in trouble and no one knows where it is, and North Korea is one of the few places where that could happen. And even if the communication worked flawlessly, there's still another problem. What happens if a plane crashes there? Accidents in modern aviation trigger massive investigations. Teams of of international experts land within hours. Black boxes are recovered. Airlines, governments, and manufacturers share data transparently to prevent another tragedy. North Korea would not allow that. Any crash inside of its borders will immediately fall under government control. Foreign investigators could be denied access. Data could be held back, and information may never reach the outside world. For airlines, it is unacceptable. They need certainty that an investigation will be public, impartial, and complete. North Korea provides none of those assurances. But even beyond danger and secrecy, there's still the political reality, one that makes flying over North Korea a diplomatic minefield. Most countries charge fees for aircraft passing through their airspace. It's normal and part of global aviation economics. However, North Korea is under heavy sanctions. Airlines in the United States, Europe, South Korea, and Japan are all restricted in how they can transfer money to North Korea. Even simple overflight payments can violate sanction laws, and North Korea can revoke permissions at any moment for political reasons. Airlines cannot base global schedules on a country that could shut its sky without warning. And even if all of these obstacles would disappear, there's still one more practical issue. The country's own airline tells you everything you need to know. North Korea does have a national airline, Air Koryo. It flies aging Soviet aircraft to a handful of destinations in China and Russia. The airline's fleet is small, outdated, and difficult to evaluate because the country rarely shares any safety records. The airport infrastructure inside of North Korea is sparse, heavily controlled by its military. Runways, navigation equipment, and maintenance facilities all operate under standards that are difficult for foreign experts to verify. Foreign airlines will seldom land in Pyongyang, and that tells the aviation world that if airports aren't being used by global carriers, the skies above them are not a safe bet. But here's the twist. Even with all of these dangers, a few flights still skirt the edge of North Korea, and that reveals something important about the sky above it. Certain Russian and Chinese aircraft fly close to North Korea's northern border. A few routes pass near the edges of North Korean-controlled zones, but almost never across the center. These exceptions exist only because those countries have political and military channels within Pyongyang. Even then, they treat the airspace with caution, staying high above or far to the side of sensitive areas. For everyone else, especially major international airlines, it's much safer and easier to simply fly around. And that rerouting doesn't only affect North Korea, it reshapes the entire map of global aviation. Airlines want direct routes. Short flights save fuel, time, and money. But avoiding North Korea pushes planes into crowded corridors over Japan, China, Mongolia, and the Sea of Japan. What could be simple and efficient becomes longer and more expensive. Some Europe-Japan flights will travel hundreds of extra kilometers. Trans-Pacific routes become tighter as everyone stays on the same narrow path. The empty sky above North Korea forces airlines to stack themselves along the edges like cars avoiding a blocked highway. It's one of the few places on the planet where a single country changes global aviation patterns simply by being unpredictable. And that brings us to the final question. What would it actually take for the world to finally use North Korea's airspace? Airlines aren't waiting for political miracles. They're waiting for predictability. For global aviation to fly safely over North Korea, the country would need to reliably announce missile testing, integrate with international ATC systems, communicate with neighboring controllers, allow independent accident investigations, maintain consistent aviation standards, and commit to transparency. But until North Korea adopts these basic practices, the aviation world will simply continue to treat its sky like a blind spot, a region where the safest decision is distance. And that brings everything together, the real reason the map above North Korea stays empty. It's not because the airspace is officially closed or because North Korea fires at planes. It's not even because of sanctions. It's because nobody knows what the North Korean military will do next. Every moment of flight depends on predictable skies, systems, and responses, and North Korea offers none of those things. Airlines simply choose caution, flying around the uncertainty, and the sky above North Korea stays silent, not by law, but by choice. Airplanes cross war zones, oceans, deserts, and mountains, but they don't cross North Korea. Not because the country forbids it, but because the world doesn't trust the silence inside of its borders. Missile testing without warnings, unpredictable behavior, incomplete communication, and a closed investigation system turns that airspace into a global blind spot. In aviation, the unknown is the greatest danger, and above North Korea, almost everything is unknown. The world is full of mysteries, and we're here to crack them. Thanks for watching World Cracked. Be sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.